Welcome back to College Football Addiction. I've got John Kurtz from here on YouTube. You can follow him, The John Kurtz Show here. Search for his name if you are looking for any Big 12 content, some Kansas State stuff, some Colorado stuff we'll talk about today. John, how you doing, man? Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, I'm doing great. Really looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a big week in the Big 12, obviously highlighted here by Colorado and Texas Tech, just what everybody predicted would be a massive game in early November in the Big 12.
Texas Tech, man, feels so. What is your read on them? Because how do you lose to TCU and Baylor? No offense to those programs or those fans, but maybe they would agree with me. And then come out and beat Iowa State. Like, does that say more about Texas Tech? Does that say more about Iowa State? Does it say more about the Big 12? Like, what is your read on that program?
Texas Tech has had a roller coaster of a season, man. It is a really tough read. Like, even if you go back to the beginning of the year, I mean, their first game of the season, they give up 50-plus points to Abilene Christian, and they only won because they stopped a 2-point conversion in overtime. So that was the start of the year. Then they went to Washington State and got whacked. Now, that loss has actually aged a lot better, I think, than most people would have thought at that time. And Texas Tech was playing without Taj Brooks, who is their best player, star running back, and one of the best players in the country. So you can have a little bit of understanding for what happened there at Wazoo. But everybody kind of counted Texas Tech out at that point. They didn't look good at all. They had a bunch of injuries. It wasn't just Taj Brooks. Their defense was pretty lit up with injuries early in the year. But they slowly started to put it back together. And they had an advantageous start to conference play in the fact that they got some home games to start. They beat Cincinnati and Arizona State, again, wins that have aged a little bit better. And then Tech fans start to get excited. They're 3-0 through the first 3 games of Big 12 play. And then it came crashing down again. They give up 59 to Baylor, like 59 points. So we've seen Texas Tech's defense give up 51 to Abilene Christian, 59 to Baylor, who is playing better offensively. And Sawyer Robertson has turned into a good quarterback. But that probably shouldn't be happening. Then they go to TCU, and if you want to cut them some slack on that, I mean, they did lose Baron Morton, their quarterback. They had a 17-point lead at one point in that game and let it all slip away. And some of it you could probably trace back to, hey, they were having to play a young, inexperienced quarterback, which seems like for Tech fans, deja vu because it happens every single year. But not a good loss at all. TCU is not a very good team. Another one of those teams that's been pretty erratic, but more on the bad side than what Texas Tech has. So, yeah, I think it's a combination of Texas Tech has dealt with some injuries. Texas Tech is a program that has not won 9 games since 2009. So they're not used to coming through consistently. I think as a program, they probably still have a little bit of work to do there. But some of it also is just the Big 12. You know, I mean, Iowa State has been playing with fire for a long time. They probably should have been beaten by UCF the previous home game before losing to Texas Tech. It took a late 2-minute drill drive from Rocco Becht company to even win that game. So I think it's a combination of the two that's allowed Texas Tech to be here still in contention for the Big 12 championship and college football playoff in November.
Yeah, that UCF loss was, man, so inexplicable. Like to give that up the late way that they did. And yeah, you're right. They certainly played with fire. Texas Tech's defense, they have given up some points. They've given up some big point totals at times. How do you think they match up with an offense that can certainly get up and get going in Colorado?
Yeah, not very well. I mean, to be honest, it feels like a game that a lot of points are probably going to come. Certainly, if you think Texas Tech is going to win the game or be really competitive, they're going to have to score a lot of points because I don't have a ton of faith in that defense to really slow them down. They're giving up 300-plus yards through the air per game, and we know that like Colorado has as good a passing attack as you're going to find in the country, and they use it more than basically anybody in the country. Like the running game is just barely there. Now, I will say it's been getting better. Isaiah Augusto, who is a freshman running back for Colorado, has been playing a little bit better, almost hit 100 yards last time out against Cincinnati. I believe he's got close to 150 yards the last 2 games, which I know you'll look at and say, well, I mean, you know, look on the other side. Taj Brooks does that every single week. But for Colorado, that's really all they need. They just need a little bit of a complement to the passing game, just enough to make you think that there's something else there. And as soon as they've started to get some of that, it opens everything up even more. So I just say that all to say I think the reputation on Colorado out there is they're just Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter and maybe a couple of other receivers, and that's all they do, and they don't play defense and they don't run the football. And all of that is not true anymore. This is definitely a team that has developed and a program that has developed, and a part of that is the running game. But where Texas Tech is going to struggle is just to match up consistently with those receivers. I don't know that really anybody in the Big 12 can do it, and you kind of just have to outscore Colorado anyway. But especially Texas Tech on paper, it does not look like a very good matchup at all.
Yeah, it's tough to ask anybody to match up with not just Travis Hunter, but the other plethora of wide receivers that they have. What about offensively? You know, Colorado's defense, you just mentioned this. Colorado's defense was probably either that or the offensive line were my biggest questions, probably everybody's biggest questions. I'm not some savant that they couldn't block or tackle last year. But Colorado's defense has been a lot better, and they've been really good in second halves of games this year. I think that, you know, teams have Nebraska, I mean, some of that was turnovers and stuff, but Nebraska scored all their points in the first half. You know, Baylor scored all their points in the first half, you know, but in North Dakota State, going back to week 1, scored all their points in the first half. Colorado's defense has been really good second halves of games, you know, really outside of that late drive against Kansas State. They've really been phenomenal. What about Texas Tech's offense? Like, what you've mentioned some injuries, some backups have played. Like, where are they health-wise, and can they put up points to stay competitive in this thing against is Colorado one of the better? I'm asking you 6 questions in one. Is Colorado one of the better Big 12 defenses that we've seen this year? And can Texas Tech score enough to matter?
I mean, honestly, it feels like Colorado is playing like one of the better Big 12 defenses now, which, again, I feel like will come as a shock to the system of just casual college football fans who have not been, or fans of the SEC or Big 10 who maybe just watch Big 12 stuff very casually and haven't paid much attention. That Colorado defense has been pretty good, man. Robert Livingston has done a phenomenal job as the defensive coordinator there and taken major strides with that group this year. I think they also upgraded the talent level through the portal, and plenty of skepticism from me included about how well all that stuff was going to fit together. But as the season has gone on, it started to click more and it started to fit together better. And that's kind of what you see with a normal, like, well-coached, good program. And so you have to give, you know, Coach Prime and company a lot of credit for the way that's been able to come together. Now, they'll have their hands full because, like I said, Taj Brooks, I think, is one of the best players in the country and probably underrated just because of the conference he plays in and even the team that he plays on in the conference. Like, people have not thought about Texas Tech as a legitimate contender this year. They had more hype going into last year, quite honestly, and had a disappointing start to the season and sort of faded off the radar. But he is a stud. He scored the game-winning touchdown in Ames last year. The guy's a lock for 100-plus yards every single week, even when everybody kind of knows what's coming. But Texas Tech can throw the ball, too. I mean, Baron Morton is a pretty good quarterback statistically. He's having a very good year. He's a guy that's been plagued by injuries throughout his entire career and finally, for the most part, has stayed healthy this year. As I said, he did get knocked out of the TCU game a couple of weeks ago, but came back against Iowa State and played a pretty gritty game. You know, it was not perfect. He had a couple interceptions, but led a phenomenal touchdown drive to win the game where they had 3 false start penalties. He did, you know, he's not perfect. He overshot a wide open man on a deep ball that could have made it a little bit simpler for them, but still found a way to drive them down against a very good defense at Iowa State to win the game on the road in a hostile environment. So Texas Tech can sling it. They can run it. That's a very good offense. I think they'll be able to move the ball and score on Colorado. It's just a matter of what's going to happen on the other side of the ball, and will that be too much to overcome? Because if we're going to say both teams have really good, effective offenses, you know, this is breaking down the game in a really simplistic way. I definitely trust the Colorado defense more than I would trust the Texas Tech defense.
What about playing on the road? What's that environment like? And, you know, not to take away from any road team, and it's certainly, you know, Coach Prime's kind of right. Like every team is viewing Colorado as kind of a Super Bowl, but and Colorado's played fairly well on the road at times. They did pretty well at Arizona, pretty well at UCF. Struggled at Nebraska. What are your thoughts on them playing on the road there? Like, how much of, you know, that's certainly not Death Valley, right? Like, what is the thought on going into Lubbock and playing there?
Yeah, it can be a pretty good atmosphere. I've been there 5 times for games in the past, and especially like a game where there's excitement around the program. They're pretty hyped up. It is, I would say, like on kind of a second tier of Big 12 environments probably, but all in this category of like when the team is good. So much of it, Texas Tech's got a great fan base. Like their basketball environment, for instance, is incredible. Absolutely up there behind Allen Fieldhouse is one of the best in the Big 12, and the team has been generally consistently good. So I think the football program struggles. I mentioned that stat. I know Tech fans hate it since 2009, not having a 9-win season since Leach left. But if the team were consistently performing better, I think it would absolutely be one of the best environments in the league. So right now you have a Tech fan base that's pretty fired up and just chomping at the bit for legitimate success here. And because of the college football playoff, the way it's set up now, they can legitimately push like, hey, we've got playoff hopes and we've got a huge game and Big Noon Kickoff is here and Colorado is coming in and Coach Prime is coming in. So I think it's going to be a pretty electric environment. I think it will be a really good showing for Texas Tech on that front. Now, Colorado has seen it. They went to Nebraska, and Texas Tech I don't think is going to match Nebraska. That's another place that I've been. I do think Nebraska has a more intimidating atmosphere and was really fired up for that game for a bunch of obvious reasons. Honestly, kind of similar story to Texas Tech, right? Like people had excitement about Nebraska this year. They always show up anyway. And then it was an old rival and Coach Prime and sort of a good versus evil setup there. And that did seem to rattle Colorado. Now, that was a long time ago. And we just talked all about how much Colorado has really grown and developed as a team and a program throughout the season. So I do think they're a different team, but I also would throw in the caveat of like, yeah, it seemed like, especially in the first half, that environment really got to them. And I guess really throughout the entire game. I mean, the offense struggled so much. I think the environment in Lincoln really did get to them. So this won't be quite on that level, but I think it will be really good. And that is one of the factors here in the game is how can Colorado handle an environment like that?
I want to ask about Travis Hunter, and then we'll wrap up here in a second. But can Travis Hunter win the Heisman if Gabriel or Ward go 13-0? Like, can the voters overlook a 13-0 quarterback in a Power 4 conference? Like, is that possible?
I've actually been a little bit surprised that people haven't started to drift more toward that already, just because like that's the environment we live in, right? I mean, we're creatures of habit, right? And the habit in giving out the Heisman is to drift toward the unbeaten quarterback, the best quarterback on the best team, or at least best quarterback on one of the best teams in the country. But it seems like, man, just casually monitoring what people are putting up there for their Heisman list, because frankly, I just, at this point, I don't care a ton about the award, but it seems like Travis Hunter is still maintaining a top spot, or at least a top 2 or 3 spot for almost everybody right now. And I think it's a bit of a unique case just because there has been so much attention surrounding him and Colorado for a long time. They've been such a big story that's been shoved in everybody's face for the last couple of years. I would say, rightfully so to an extent, but they've gotten a lot of extra boost of coverage, and it's been built up for a long time. So there's a high name ID there, right? We just got out of political season, right? There's a high name ID with Travis Hunter because of what's been built up over the last couple of years. So I think that gives him more of a chance. Now, if you ask me, if Dillon Gabriel, if they run the table, if Oregon runs the table, do I think that Travis Hunter will ultimately win it? I would probably still just side toward, not saying this is right, but I would probably still side with, I know these sports writers, man, these Heisman voters. Like it's always been kind of infuriating. Nobody will wait long enough to, people make their decision too early. They don't wait through conference championship weekend, all that stuff. I've just seen it too many times. I would probably still bet on the unbeaten quarterback or Cam Ward, if it's going to be Cam Ward. I'd probably still bet on that, but I think Travis Hunter definitely has a legitimate chance, and it's this media machine that's been built up for a long time with him that's going to help out a lot.
Yeah, they need a little bit of help, but I think if they could get to the Big 12 championship, certainly if they were to win that against an undefeated BYU, that would probably help. I think him not like Dillon and Cam playing on Conference Championship Saturday, you got to figure one of them is probably going to win. And one of them probably has a really good game. I mean, Cam hasn't had a bad game yet. And so you would think that like that could hurt him. Now, if he could go to the Big 12 championship and he has a pick and a touchdown, or, and maybe Gabriel drops to Ohio State or something like that, then maybe that helps him. But if they're at home on Conference Championship Saturday, that might be the nail in the coffin. Now, he could also go for 3 touchdowns this weekend and kind of give himself a leg up to have a chance. But if they all keep winning and he's not in that Saturday, that could probably, that would probably spell doom too. But you're right. Like if there, it almost feels like sometimes in the NBA, far reach here maybe, but in the NBA, their MVP award doesn't typically go to the best player. It's kind of like the new flavor of the month. Like,
Yeah.
if we can be honest with ourselves, like LeBron should have won the MVP like 8 years in a row. Like there, but it's boring to vote for LeBron every single year. Well, I guess what's different in college football is it's still a different player, but it's basically the same player. It's just the best quarterback on the best team. And so you don't get that. We need a new flavor of the month because you do have a new flavor of the month every year, a new flavor of the year, because it's a new player, right? It's still the same person. It's Caleb Williams, it's Jameis, it's Tebow, it's Manziel, but it's the same guy. It's just the best quarterback on the team that wins a lot. And so, well, I guess Manziel's not necessarily the same there, but I do think that's. If this was the NBA, they would definitely go with Hunter because they like going with like the new flavor. In college football, it's a little different.
Yeah, well, I wonder too if Ashton Genty actually helps out a little bit here because it's kind of formulated a new overall narrative this year, which is like, hey, it's not all quarterbacks, right? Like we've got a running back that's producing at a crazy high level. And, I think the odds are stacked more against him just because he hasn't had this massive media campaign for a long time. And excuse me, not as many people are seeing him on a week-to-week basis because he's playing at Boise instead of Colorado. But I wonder if the overall pairing of the two there will help people be like, all right, well, maybe this is the year we really shouldn't go with a quarterback, and therefore that actually helps out Travis Hunter a little bit.
Yeah. In this game, Colorado a 3.5-point favorite on the road. Do you have a lean here? Do you think they end up covering? Do you think Texas Tech pulls the upset? What's your prediction for this one?
Yeah, I just covering the Big 12 a long time. I haven't seen Texas Tech win a lot of these games when they get these opportunities. Now, they did win a big one last week. I know Texas Tech fans would say, well, we just did it last week and did it on the road in a tougher environment. And that is very true. But especially as someone who, like, I picked Tech to win the Big 12 last year. I was buying in on the hype big time. I like Joey McGuire a lot, but I have just felt burned when I've done that too much. And honestly, like I said, very simplistic breakdown of the game. I like both offenses a lot, but I trust Colorado's defense more. I think they've been playing at a really high level lately, and that combination leads me to believe that I think Colorado wins, by 6 or 7, like a 1 touchdown. I think it'll be a 1-score game. I think it'll be very close and competitive, but my lean right now would definitely be toward Colorado just because of history and their defense predominantly.
Yeah. John, I appreciate you for hanging out a minute. We'll talk Kansas State in a sec, but where can people follow you? Where can they find more of your work?
Yeah, so if you just search John Kurtz on YouTube, JohnKurtz, you can find all of my stuff there. And if you're a Big 12 fan and you want this type of stuff coming to your inbox 3 times a week for free, you can subscribe to my Big 12 newsletter, Open for Business. It's ofbnews.com to subscribe to that. And you can also just follow me on Twitter at JLKurtz.
Awesome, man. I appreciate you, buddy.
Yeah, anytime.